So, good morning and welcome. This is Father Marcus from the Costa Blanca Anglican Chaplaincy, delighted to be in Merced Church here in Calpe, sharing a few thoughts with you. Last week we had the Gospel reading of the feeding of the 5,000, and it was an incredible story. And this week this story continues. At the end of the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus sends the crowds away and sends his disciples away in a boat and then goes up on the mountain to pray. And it's fairly clear that he spends the whole night in prayer, because we discover in the reading that when it's night time, the disciples are struggling with the big wind and the waves on the boat, and Jesus is up on the mountain. And then what happens is it moves on to early in the morning. What's very clear to us is that after big events or before big events in the life of Jesus, he needs time to be still, time to set himself apart, time to pray. And there are so many instances in scriptures of people going up the mountains and having this religious experience. And we know that Jesus goes up the mountain. We don't know what happens up there other than he goes up to pray. And the story continues in the morning. But I want to spend a moment just with this idea of taking time out to be still with God. In 1983, when I finished my curacy at St Mary the Virgin in Eastbourne, my friend Steve and I got a big van and filled it up with all sorts of bits and pieces that we drove to Calcutta in India and went to work with the Sisters of Mercy of Mother Teresa. And we got a job in an orphanage called Boys Town in Calcutta. And we spent 3 months there. And those of you who know me well know that I got ordained when I was 12. And so I was about 15 by this time. And we drove all the way to Calcutta. And I get lost finding the loo in my own house. So however we got to Calcutta, I have no idea. But we got there full of that youthful enthusiasm. And we handed over this big van load of supplies and were so excited to get on with the work of looking after those who were in most need. And we were affiliated with this group of nuns. And what would happen, they would go about their various tasks. There were, as you know, I'm sure, homes for people with leprosy, homes for children who are abandoned on the street, homes for the dying and the destitute. And some of the nuns would go out into the streets and just minister to people where they fell, almost. And we got involved in all of this, in particular with the place where we were staying, this boys' orphanage. And what we discovered very quickly was that the nuns would be about that task for 3 hours, and then they would go back to their convent or their place of safety. And we would say, why are you going back? Why are you going back to your room? Why are you going back there? There's so much more to do. There are so many people in need. There are so many people who need your love and tender care and your mercy, your Sisters of Mercy. And they said, if we don't go back and be still in the presence of God and look after ourselves, then we will burn ourselves out in no time and we're no use to anyone. And with our youthful enthusiasm and excitement, we struggled with this. And you won't be surprised that by the end of the 3 months that we were there, Steve and I were absolutely burned out, because we couldn't get our heads around this idea of taking time out and just being still. And so it's no surprise that Jesus takes these moments to go and be still. And I think the point of what I'm trying to say is it's very easy for us to make ourselves busy with all sorts of things. Probably many of them don't really matter. And sometimes we leave the priority of us spending time being still in the presence of God as fairly down and low on the list of priorities. And yet I think it's probably up there with the highest of our priorities. So if you take anything away from this, may it be that you find time daily to be still in the presence of God. Anyway, the story continues. It becomes the morning. The disciples have been out in the boat battling against the waves all night. Jesus has been up in the mountain praying all night, or he went up the mountain and prayed and then started to walk, because by the time we get to the morning, Jesus is walking across the lake and the disciples see him. We could do all sorts of unpacking. Was it very shallow? Was he walking in the surf by the seashore? Was he walking on the lake? In a sense, it doesn't matter. I have no problem believing in the miraculous when it comes to God. And so the story says he was walking on the lake, and I'm happy with that. But it's not compulsory for us to believe that to get something out of the story. Peter does a typical Peter. He says, first of all, they panic thinking it's a ghost. There's someone walking on the water, you can't do that. And Jesus says, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. How beautiful are those words. The story unfolds. It's so easy for us to move from a place of plenty and peace and security to a time of trouble. But once again, we see Jesus taking the initiative and approaching the disciples. And then when they panic, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. Then Peter does that Peter thing. He wants to get in amongst it. If it's you, Lord, tell me to get out of the boat and walk across the water. Okay, come, says Jesus. So Peter, did he jump? Was he gentle? I don't know, but he gets out of the boat, starts walking, and straight away he looks and there's a wave and he can hear the wind, and he starts to think. He starts to sink, not think, sink. He starts to think, Lord, save me, he cries. And immediately Jesus is there and takes him by the hand and saves him. He says, why did you doubt? One of the beautiful things of this is that trust and that love of Peter. I can do this. I can do this. And bless him, he has a go. And he gets out of the boat and he starts to walk. But then he takes his eyes off Jesus. He starts thinking about the things of the world. I don't think this is a story about if you've got enough faith, you can do miracles, like walking on the water. And also what I don't think it is saying, if I put God to the test and he wants to prove himself to me, he will give me the ability to do anything. I don't think it's those. What I think it is Peter saying, I want to be like you. I want to try and be like you. And he has a go at it, but immediately he starts thinking of the things of the world. And he discovers he is a man of the world. This is an incredible, beautiful and uplifting story. And what I believe we take from it is that we are called to do a number of things. To prioritise taking time each day to being still and in the presence of God. To trust that God will be with us when the going gets tough, and to accept that Jesus always takes the initiative, and to to focus on Jesus and to accept however much we want to try and be like him. To focus on the message of Jesus. It's not about putting ourselves or our faith or God to the test. It is, I believe, about living our life to the full.